Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today's workshop. Now, this is ADManager Plus workshop number 4. Now, the first 3 weeks, we had covered various topics in ADManager Plus. For the first week, it was about user provisioning. So when I say user provisioning, it's all about managing user accounts in Active Directory. And I mean, starting off with the first phase of lifecycle management, which is account creation in Office 365 and account creation in Exchange, account creation in AD. So we are talking about 360-degree account provisioning here. So that was the topic for the first workshop. And for the second workshop, it was all about modification. How do you manage users in Active Directory? How do you reset password, unlock accounts, modify their group membership, and all that? And the best part is we also spoke about minimizing the usage of scripts, be it PowerShell or VB script. And the third session or the third week was all about workflow and AD delegation. So workflow, all of you know, it is a request and approve methodology. For example, if you'd like to grant the HR department to raise the request for user creation and you as administrators would like to review the request and then approve it. So how do you do that? So it was all about workflow, and delegation is how do you securely delegate tasks to your colleagues in your organization, irrespective of their designation. They can be help desk, they can be HR, they can be IT administrators. So how do you define roles and delegate very securely to them with all kinds of restrictions that you want? So that was the topic for the third workshop. Now, fourth workshop is going to be about script-free reporting. So we are going to see how to retrieve vital information from Active Directory just by the click of a button. Okay, so we are going to talk about permission management, group membership management, and also how do you retrieve vital stats from Active Directory. So that would be the core topic for today's discussion. So before jumping into today's session, let me introduce myself. My name is Vivin, and I am the pre-sales consultant for the AD Solution Suite here at ManageEngine. Okay, so today's topic, these are going to be the topics for today's discussion. To start with, we will be discussing about logon permissions. For example, you might have critical file servers or member servers in your organizations, and you do not want all users in your organization to log into those servers for some security reason. So how do you restrict the access to, the logon access to certain critical servers or even file servers for certain users in your organization? So that would be the first task. Second one is how do you reset password for users in bulk? And what is the necessity for a password reset in bulk? For instance, if you have a brute force attack in your organization, the best way or the most simplest way in order to overcome a brute force attack is by resetting password for users. Okay, so we are going to have a look at that. And the third topic is reporting on custom attributes. The fourth one is how do you find out and remove inappropriate access or permissions vested on users via group memberships. So that, and we'll be talking a bit about cleaning up your Active Directory environment. Cleaning up in the sense we will be first finding out users who have not logged into your Active Directory structure for the past 60 days or 90 days, and then we will be performing a sequential deprovisioning process. So these are going to be the topics for today's discussion. Having said that, let me quickly log in and then start today's workshop. Okay, so for those of you who have a test lab or a test installation in your end, you can very well make use of that. For those of you who do not have one, you can very well make use of the setup that we have hosted online. And in order to log in to the test setup, I would request you to have a look at your chat windows because I'm going to share the URL. And here we go. Okay, so I've shared the URL. The URL is going to be http://admp.cloudapp.net, and I've shared the credentials as well. So the username is going to be ADMP and the password is going to be workshop with W capitalized. And the most important thing is the logon to should be set to ADManager Plus authentication. All right, so let's just log in and start today's session. Okay, so as soon as I log into ADManager Plus, as you all know, I will be welcomed by the product dashboard. And as you can see, we have many tabs in ADManager Plus for various features. And the feature for today's workshop will be reporting. And that's in the AD Reports tab. So I go to AD Reports. And as I said, the first task that we are going to do is we are going to identify the logon permissions granted to inappropriate users. Okay, so how do you find that? So first, our task for today is I'm going to isolate the domain admins from the rest of the Active Directory users, and I'm going to make sure that only the domain admins have access to a specific server in my organization. Let's say that it's going to be a file server. So how do I do that? So I go to user reports, and in the user reports, I have a report which is, so you have these many reports in ADManager Plus, and you can very well make use of any reports so that you get to you benefit from it. So the report that we are going to focus on will be under the group reports section. Okay, and how am I going to filter out the domain admins from the 3,000 employees that I have in the organization? So, and how am I going to impose a logon restriction for the other users apart from the domain admins group? So for that, I need to first filter out the domain admins group. That would be the first task. So in order to do that, I go to AD reports, group reports, and then you have something called users not in groups. So I go to the report users not in groups, and the group that we are trying to isolate is the domain admins. And we are going to impose a logon restrictions for the other users in my Active Directory structure. So other users in the sense are users who do not belong to the domain admins group. So how do I filter out domain admins group? I click the plus sign here, and then I search for domain admins. Okay, so I get a pop-up window with a list of all the security groups in my Active Directory structure. So I search for domain admins. So yes, so now I have the domain admins group listed. So I select the group, hit OK, and I hit generate. Now this report will give me the list of all users who do not belong to the domain admins group. Now if I have the list, I can very well impose a logon restriction on the entire list of users. And how do you impose a logon restriction? Very simple. Once you have the list of users who do not belong to the domain admins group and you do not want them to log into a certain PC, you do a check all and then you go to more actions. So you can delete, disable, and then you have the other actions under more actions right here. So you go to more actions and you can impose a logon restrictions. So if you just scroll down, so you have the list right here. If you scroll down, you have n number of actions that you can pick and choose from. And we are trying to impose logon restrictions. So I click on user workstations right here. So in order to impose logon restrictions on certain workstations or servers, I go to user workstations, and then I have 4 radio buttons. And what are we going to do now? We are going to impose a logon restriction here. Okay, so I allow only selected computers to these user accounts, and I want them to be removed from certain computers. And these computers are going to be the file servers that we are talking about. And how do you do that? You click the plus sign here. Now this plus sign gives you the list of all the computers in your Active Directory structure. That includes workstations, member servers, file servers, and even domain controllers. Let's assume that I don't want these users, users who do not belong to the domain admins group, to be logging into the SQL server. Okay, so I select the SQL server right here. I hit OK, and the minute I hit apply, all these users will be removed from the permission list of the SQL server that we have selected. And this list has the list of all the entire users in my Active Directory structure, excluding the domain admins group. So if I hit apply, so this is how I perform the modifications just with the click of a button. So now I'm trying to impose a logon restriction. That's the process here. And if you have the permissions right, you would be able to manage the permissions on the SQL Server. Okay, so that's the first task here. And the second task that we are going to be talking about is something related to security. And what can we talk about in Active Directory when it comes to security? So we are going to talk about a bit on group memberships here. Okay, so have you ever wondered how a normal user in Active Directory has domain admin rights? And you have no clue on how that works. So in order to investigate the inappropriate permissions vested on user accounts via group membership, you can make use of the reporting section in ADManager Plus. To be specific, you can use the users in groups or the groups for users report in ADManager Plus. So you can perform the search from the user's perspective or from the group's perspective. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at groups for users. And before that, I want you to have a look at my screen because I'm going to show you something very, very important here. Okay, now how do you normally verify the group membership of a user account in Active Directory without the use of any other third-party tools? So what you do is you open up a domain controller and then you open up the Active Directory users and computers. And what you do is once you have the list of user accounts, and if you need to find out the group membership of the highlighted user, which is nested user, you do a double click and you have a new window and you have a tab named member of. So you go to the tab member of. Perfect, you just have two groups for this user, domain users and nested group. That's good. And if you perform a permission analysis in Active Directory, this user who is directly a member of two groups has the rights of a domain admin. Now, how is this even possible? The reason is this nested group is in turn iteratively linked to top level admin groups in your Active Directory structure. And will the Microsoft console tell you that the nested group is in turn linked to 10 different groups? Yes, but you'll have to again inspect the group membership of this specific group here. That's going to be a bit complex. So how do you get the information, vital information, just with a click of a button? You have it right here. So the user that we are going to investigate is nested user, and according to the Active Directory console, the user is a part of two groups, domain users and nested group. So let's see what ADManager Plus has to report. Okay, so I go to groups for users. Okay, now I select the user that we are talking about. So I'm going to select, and I have the pop-up window right here. And I'm going to search for the user account. The user account that we are talking about is nested user. So I go to nested, I search with the keyword nested. Okay, I have the user listed right here. I hit OK and generate. So let's see what the application has to offer. So according to Active Directory, the user is just a part of two groups. But according to ADManager Plus, the user is a part of 8 groups. All right. And if I just have a look at the list right here, the groups that we are going to be talking about are going to be top level admin groups. So you have domain admins, you have enterprise admins, you have another administrators group linked. So how did this even happen? As you can see here, this nested group is in turn linked to the top level admin groups, and the Microsoft console did not show the iterative group membership. So you can get the iterative group membership or the consolidated list of groups for a specific user just with a click of a button. So that's the powerfulness of this tool. So this tool or this report does not only investigates the direct group membership, it does also investigate the nested group membership also. Okay, so you have the report right here. And once you have the report, how do you remove this user from the other groups except domain users? Very simple. We covered this in our second workshop. Anyways, I'll just do it once again. So in order to remove the unwanted groups from this user account, all you need to do is just go to AD Management. And if you go to AD Management, you have a section there for group attributes. So manipulating group attributes of user accounts. So you go to group attributes, and then we are trying to remove or clear all the group memberships for the user account, and we are going to set just one group for the user account as a member, and the group that we are talking about is domain users. Okay, so I search for the group. You have domain users right here. I hit OK. So I need to add a group as primary or set a group as primary, so that's going to be domain users as well. So domain users. Okay, domain users. Okay, so now what we have done is we earlier generated a report that gave me the list of all users, or list of all groups that the user is a member of, either direct or nested. And then what we're doing now is we are removing all groups from that user account except the basic group, which is domain users. And if you do a search here, you will be getting the user that we are talking about, which is the nested user. The name of the account is going to be nested user. And if you'd like to wipe out all the group membership, so it's very simple. And once you have the list here, let's assume that you have a list of 20 users. You do a check all, and then you hit apply. Okay, so the minute you hit apply, you will be removing all the groups for this user account, and then you'll be setting the domain users as the primary group. Okay, so this is how you investigate the group membership of a user account using ADManager Plus. Now that we discussed something about group membership, let's talk something about file and folder permissions. Okay, so we have a dedicated section for NTFS within ADManager Plus, and you have it right here, NTFS reports. Okay, so you go to NTFS reports and you have 4 reports here. And the case that we are going to be talking about is almost everyone present in this webinar will be having shared folders in your Windows infrastructure. And some of those shared folders will contain critical data pertaining to your organization. They can be finance data or any project information that should be accessible only by the top level people in your management. So if that is the case, how do you make sure that those critical information is not accessible by anyone else except by the top level people in your organization? So you need to do 2 things for that. First, you need to find out who has access to those folders. And if you find any inappropriate users having access to those folders, you will have to perform a permission cleanup instantly. So you'll have to do 2 things. So how do you get started here? So you go to AD reports and you go to NTFS reports. Let's assume that I have a folder named confidential folder that has all project information within it. So how do I make sure, or how do I get the list of users who have access to that folder? I have a report dedicated for that, which is permissions for folders. I go to the report permission for folders, and then I select the path that I'd like to query or I'd like to search for. So I know the path in which I have the shared folder. So first, this gives me the list of all file servers in my Active Directory structure. And if I need to query a specific file server, I just click, and then I get the list of all shares within that file server. Okay, so now it's trying to query all the file servers, all the shares within the selected server. So it looks like I have 4 shares right here. And one of them is going to be confidential share, the share that we're talking about. So I'd like to get the list of users who have access to the confidential share. So I select and I hit OK. And then if that share has 50 subfolders within it, how do I search for permissions? So you have right here. So you click the drop down list, and then you have the option to choose the level of subfolders. So assuming that the folder has 20 subfolders, I go for a 20 subfolder level permission query and I hit generate. So the minute I hit generate, the application will give me the list of users who have access to the selected share, and that is the confidential share. Okay, so I have the list. It looks like 14 entries have access to the share, to the confidential share. And let's just go through the list here. So I have user, I have groups. Wait a minute. I see that the folder, the confidential shared folder, is accessible by everyone in my Active Directory structure. Now, this is not something that you as an administrator would want. And once you see this, you would like to perform an immediate permission cleanup so that you can make sure that only the appropriate users have access to the share. And how do you do that? That's the second step here. So once you have the list of entries who have access to the share, you go to AD management. Now, what we're trying to do is we are just trying to set the domain admins group to access the specific confidential share. Okay, so you go to AD management and we have a section for managing permissions on file servers, which is file server management. And we are trying to modify the NTFS permission. So I go to modify NTFS permissions. And then I pick and choose the folder or the shared folder that we are talking about. And the folder that we're talking about is confidential share. So I click on select. And then I search for the share. Okay, here we go. I hit OK. And how do I assign permissions for domain admins? Simple. You click the select link, and this will give you the list of all users and groups belonging to your Active Directory structure. You just search for domain admins. You go to groups and domain admin, and then you hit search. Now this will give me the domain admins group of my Active Directory structure. I hit OK. And what permission would I like to grant the domain admins group over the shared folder? So is it full control, modified, read, write, or any permission that you can pick and choose or that you can think of? So for now, I'm just going with full control. And do I want this permission to be applied for the subfolders as well? Yes. And if so, how many subfolders? All subfolders and files, or just the subfolders and not the files? So I go with this subfolder and all its files, and it can be an allow or a deny, but for now we are going to allow the domain admins the access to the confidential share. But the task is not complete. How do I wipe out the existing permissions? The answer is right here. The second checkbox does the trick for you. The second checkbox reads, remove all existing permissions and apply only the above permissions. So I select the second checkbox, and the minute I hit modify, this action will wipe out all the existing permissions on the selected share, and it will make sure that the share is accessible only by the domain admins group. Now, this is how you find out and manage permissions on confidential shares in your network, in your Windows infrastructure. So that's about permission cleanup and NTFS permission analysis and management. And the next task is we are going to have a look at some general reports within ADManager Plus. And I'll show you how you can benefit from by generating those reports. The first report that we're going to talk about is users with empty attributes. Okay, now this report will come in handy whenever you'd like to perform a search in order to find out whether a specific attribute is left empty for any of your user accounts in your Active Directory structure. Say for example, if you have a script that is set to execute against any specific user attribute in Active Directory, like the user's description. So the script will break if the description attribute is null for user account. So you need to make sure that the attribute value is not null. And how do you find that out? So you can just find it out by generating a simple report within the application, which is users with empty attributes. So you have the empty attribute list right here, and if you click on the sign, you would get a pop-up window with the attributes that you can use for the query process. Okay, so for now I'm just going to find out the users with no description field populated. Okay, and how do you find that out? So you select the description attribute here under the selected attributes list, you hit save, and then you hit generate. Okay, so the minute you hit generate, the application will give you the list of all users who have the description attribute blank. Okay, so if a script is set to execute against the description attribute, so you can very well find that out just by generating a button here. I mean generating a report. So you can see that we have close to 61 users for whom the description attribute is not set in your Active Directory structure. So you can just go ahead and manage those users accordingly. Okay, and this is not only for the description attribute. So if you might have any SMS application installed in your AD environment, so that is sent out, I mean that is responsible for sending out notifications to your user's telephone number. So in such cases, you do not want the telephone number attribute to be empty. So you can make sure that the telephone number attribute is populated for all the user accounts just by generating this specific report. So you select the attribute telephone number, hit save, and then you just go ahead and generate the report. So when the report is complete, this is going to give you the list of all the user accounts in your Active Directory structure who do not have the telephone number attribute populated. So you can just go ahead and export this report to a CSV.de and then manually populate the telephone number attribute for the user accounts. So and we saw how to do it in a previous workshop. So the video is available online, the link for which will be shared with you upon request. So you can just you will be getting a survey soon after the session is over, and if you need the links for the previous workshops, you can very well reply to the survey and we'll be more than happy to share the resources with you. Okay, so you export it to CSV.de, go to AD management, and then populate the telephone attribute or any attribute for that matter for your user accounts just by generating a report. Okay, so the next general report that we are going to talk about is users with duplicate attributes. Now, you as an administrator wouldn't want two users with the same employee ID. Okay, so assuming that you have a 3,000 users in your Active Directory structure, performing a check on all the user accounts one by one is going to be a time-consuming process. So in order to do that in a much easier manner and a less time-consuming manner, you have the report here, right here, which is users with duplicate attributes. So you select the report, and if you need to find out if there are any user accounts in your Active Directory structure with the same employee ID, I just click the plus sign right here, and the attribute that we are going to query is employee ID. Though I have 44 attributes that I can check for duplicates, I'm just going with employee ID for now. Employee ID. Okay. Okay, so I have employee ID right here. I select employee ID, hit OK, and then if I hit generate, now this report will give me the list of all users with duplicate employee IDs. Okay, so it looks like two users in my Active Directory structure have the same employee ID. And what is their employee ID and how would I find that out? Do not worry, you just click the add or remove columns link just above the report. Add, remove columns. Now this will give you a pop-up window from which you can choose the attribute that you're looking for, and we are looking for the employee ID attribute. You have it right here. So you bring it to the other side, you hit OK, And now you have the employee ID populated. Yes, the report was right. It looks like two user accounts have the same employee ID, and I need to make sure that it is changed. So I can just go ahead and change the employee ID just from this report, or I simply click the user account and then I change the employee ID from the user interface itself. So I'll be able to manage or change the employee ID, and then I do a preview and I hit update user. So in the preview it says that I'm going to alter the employee ID field. The existing value is this and the new value is going to be this, and the minute I hit update in user I'll be able to perform the modification in AD. So this is how I find out users with the same attributes or duplicate attributes, and I manage those attributes just with a click of a button. Okay, so we are nearing the end of this workshop session. So before which I'd like to share a few other reports as well, a few other important reports as well. So next we're going to have a look at some reports related to passwords. So, I mean, we have seen that in most of the cases that the help desk receive calls on a regular basis that are related to expired passwords or locked out accounts. So in order to deal with expired password accounts, you have a report within ADManager Plus. I mean, we are talking about proactively dealing with password expired users and not being reactive. Okay, so you can just generate the report which is soon to expire user passwords in order to find out if there are any user account whose passwords are set to expire in the next n number of days. And it can be either 7 days or 5 days or 4 days. You just generate a report based on the number of days that you want and you hit generate. Now, if there are any user accounts in your Active Directory structure whose password is set to expire in the next 7 days, you will be getting the list right here. And once you have the list, as we saw in the other reports, you do a check all and then manage their password notifications or alert them by sending out a notification stating that the password is about to expire so that they can change it and then avoid calling the help desk for a password reset. Okay, that is soon to expire user passwords. And next, last but not least, we are going to talk about cleaning up your Active Directory. So the first step in the deprovisioning process is you need to find out the list of users who have not logged into your Active Directory structure for the last 30 days or 90 days or 120 days. And why do you need to find this? Because they might be consuming licenses in your Active Directory organization, be it in the case of Office 365 or AD Self-Service or any other application which is licensed based on the number of users. And if they are consuming, they in the sense, if the inactive users in your organization are consuming the valid licenses, you can generate or clean up those licenses and then give it to the active users. And how do you do that? First, you need to find the list of users who are inactive in your Active Directory structure. You have a report right here in ADManager Plus. So you go to AD reports and then you go to user reports. You have inactive users right here. You go to inactive users and then you generate the report for any number of days that you're looking for. So inactivity for the last 30, 60 or 90 days. So if I just go with 30 days and before generating the report, or I have two options to refine my search. I can exclude never logged on users from the search, or I can exclude disabled users. Okay, so you can use these as filters if that is your requirement. So I hit generate. Now this report is going to give me the list of users who have not logged into my Active Directory structure. As you might have noticed while generating the report, I had the signs or symbols of two domain controllers right here, which means this report is going to query all the configured domain controllers just to make sure that the report is accurate. Now the list that you have here is going to be accurate, and the reason is the application has queried the last logon and the last logon timestamp on all the configured domain controllers based on which the inactivity is calculated. So once I have a list of users who have not logged into your Active Directory structure for the past 30 days, you can manage those users on the fly. How do you do that? Again, you do a check all. You can move them to a different OU. Let's assume that you have an OU named inactive users or resigned employees or resigning employees. You can just go ahead and move them to any OU that you want. And how do you do that? You just click the drop down list here and you have something called move users. So you go to move users, you hit go. Now the next step is you'll have to choose the target container to which you'd like to move all the inactive users to. So for which you have select container option right here. You go to the plus sign, which gives you the tree view or the OU tree view of your Active Directory structure. If you'd like to move them to a specific OU, you choose the right OU, hit OK, and hit apply. Now, if you hit apply, all these user accounts listed here will be moved to the target container that you have defined. Now, this is the first step of performing an Active Directory cleanup or for performing an Active Directory cleanup. Okay, so after moving these users to a specific container, so what else can you do? You can very well make sure that they are removed from all security groups. Okay, so you again go to the inactive users report and then you choose the user accounts right here. Now once you have the list of user accounts, you go to more actions, and then now we are trying to remove all security groups from those user accounts. Okay, you have group attributes, hit go, and you'd like to make sure that no security group is associated for some security reasons. You do clear all group membership. If you don't want them to be a part of domain users, you can even wipe that out from the list and then hit apply. So this is the second stage. So after which, if you'd like to perform another action like disable those accounts and then delete those accounts, you can do it just from the reporting section itself. So that's the powerfulness of this tool. So this tool retrieves vital information from Active Directory with just few mouse clicks. So you find out the period of inactivity, and you have few other reports like finding out the group membership of user accounts. And one report that I would like to show you is you have something called detailed group members report. So you go to AD reports, group reports, and then you have something called detailed group members. And normally in 90% of the cases, the reporting that you have with other applications will give you the list of users belonging to a certain group. But what about the other objects within the group? What about the groups? What about the computers? And what about the contacts within the group? So the detailed group members report within ADManager Plus will give you the list of all objects within the selected group. For example, if you'd like to find out the list of users, groups, computers, and contacts within the domain admins group, you just hit select and then you select a group or you search for a group. And in our case, we are going to search for the domain admins group. Okay, you have the domain admins getting listed here. You hit OK, and before hitting generate, let's assume that you'd like to have a few attributes listed for the users within the domain admins group. So how do you set the attributes that you want? You have a small sign here. If you just click on the symbol, you have something called columns. You can add or remove any columns that you'd like to see in this report. For example, if I go to columns and if I go to view all attributes, so you have these many attributes that you can include in the search. So this report not only gives you the list of users within the selected group, but also allows you to search for or query the other attributes associated to the user account as well. For example, if you need to find out the first name and the last name of the users within the domain admins group, you select these two check boxes here, first name and last name. If you need the employee ID, it's right here. Similarly, you can even include the SID and the object GUID as well. And if you need to know their password status and account status, it is right here. Account status and password expiry and password status. Any attribute, any user attribute that you can think of can be associated to this report. So that's the powerfulness of this report. Okay, so you hit generate, you get the list of all security objects within the domain admins group. Okay, so it's generating. Okay, so we have the list. So you have 10 users, and then you have 3 security groups, you have 0 computers, and you have no contact objects. So we have 13 Active Directory objects within the domain admins group. So, and as you can see here, the attributes that you have under the users category are going to be the ones that you selected by selecting or by clicking on the sign here. Okay, so if you'd like to add more attributes to the list, you just hit the small edit sign and then you add any attribute that you want to the list. So there you go. You hit save and then the view gets modified as per your requirement. You can even export this report to any format that you want. Okay, now the best part about the reporting section within ADManager Plus is two things. It will allow you to view vital statistics in Active Directory when it comes to user objects or any other objects for that matter. And the second thing and the most important part is you will be able to manage users on the fly. So just by generating a report, you'll be able to manage users on the fly. And you can export this report to any format that you want. So some of the common formats are listed here: CSV, PDF, spreadsheet, HTML, and CSV.de. Now this CSV.de format will be very helpful for you if you have a requirement of managing users in bulk. Let's assume that you are planning to decommission a file server, which means you'll be moving home folders from one file server to another, for which you need to have the list of user accounts. Now, instead of you manually creating a list, you just generate the all users report within the application. You go to export as, and you export the report to CSV.de. Now, what is the difference between CSV and CSV.de? Now, CSV.de, if you export a report to CSV.de, that will give you the list with LDAP headers. And the report with LDAP headers can be readily imported into the AD management section in order to perform any action that you want. That's the best part here. So you have a ready-made report that can be imported into the application for performing any management action that you can think of. Okay, now let's say that, the reports that we discussed so far are going to be click and generate. So what if I have a list of 5 user accounts in an Excel sheet and I'd like to import the list into ADManager Plus and get information related to those 5 accounts? Is there an option? Yes. We have something named report from CSV. Assuming that you have a CSV file in place, you go to report from CSV and then you import the CSV file that contains the name of the user account, and not just the name. We are very specific because we need to make sure that the attribute that we are using in the CSV file locates the right users. And what do I mean by the right users? You can have 2 John Smiths in your organization, or you can have 2 Daniel Craigs. And if you're trying to locate users based on the first name, the chances of you finding the right users are very light. So in order to avoid that, we are going to use a fingerprint attribute in order to locate users in Active Directory. So what is the fingerprint attribute? It is the SAM account name. And why do I call it the fingerprint attribute? Because the SAM account name, or the pre-Windows logon name, is going to be the fingerprint attribute. It is going to be a unique attribute for user accounts. So you just include the SAM account name of the user accounts in a CSV file, and then you import it by going to the report from CSV section. You import the file, you hit generate, and you get the list here. So you have two users in the CSV file, John Smith and Paul, and if you import the list here and hit generate, the report will give you the information pertaining to the user accounts in the CSV file. And as I said, you can add or remove any columns to this report just by clicking on the sign right here, and you can export this report to any format that you want. And let's say you do not have the time to log into ADManager Plus and manually generate the report. You have an option to schedule reports as well, so that the application generates the reports and then it would send it to your inbox. So you can schedule the reports on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and then have the application emailed to you. So this is the scheduling part that I was talking about. In order to create or receive a report, you go to create schedule, and then you pick and choose the report that you'd like to receive. Let's say you'd like to get the list of recently deleted users in the last 30 days. So you go to recently deleted users, you type the number of days right here, 30, and you can filter your search by using the add filter option right here, and then you can schedule this report on a daily, weekly, hourly, or even monthly basis, or you want it just once on a specific date and time. You have it right here. You pick and choose the date and time, and if you'd like to repeat the frequency, repeat it once in every 2 days, or repeat it for the entire week on selected days. You can just go ahead and choose any category or any criteria and the format. So this is going to be the attachment format. If you'd like to receive the report as a PDF document, you choose the PDF document right here and you specify your email address. Okay, so a copy of the report will be stored in the location that you see here as well. So these are the features that are available in the reporting section of ADManager Plus. So just a quick recap. So we saw how to identify users with inappropriate logon permissions and clean them up. We saw how to perform a bulk password reset, and also how do you clean up Active Directory permissions, especially group permissions and NTFS permissions. And how do you find out stale accounts in Active Directory and remove them from Active Directory based on a sequence. So that's it for today's workshop, and the next workshop, which is scheduled same date, same time, we will be discussing about automation. So how are you going to automate crucial tasks in Active Directory? So how do you automate the process of user provisioning, user deprovisioning? So those are going to be the topics for the next workshop, and apart from that, we'll be discussing about few tips and tricks as well. And we also have a mobile app for ADManager Plus, that's for iPhone and the Android operating systems, and we'll be discussing about that as well. Thank you very much for setting some time apart for today's workshop. You all have a nice evening. Bye-bye.